Hi, everybody. Good to see you all today. We are so lucky to have Dr. Ari Calhoun joining us today to talk about preconception, pregnancy, and postpartum. Dr. Ari is an expert in women's health and particularly in naturopathic pediatric care as well. And she is the founder of Kith and Kin Wellness, which is an amazing clinic as well as community for moms. And she is really passionate about equipping mothers with the tools to raise really healthy children and to nourish themselves as well. So, what I'll say is, we are going to talk today a lot about so many different things. We could probably talk for 3 hours. But something that I really love that Dr. Ari does in her practice is a lot of education about the type of prenatal care that women need, um, the type of preconception care. So you can start a year before you're ready to get pregnant, nourishing your body, adequately preparing to carry a really healthy baby. And what you do during that time can really impact your baby on a number of levels from infancy up until they're an adult. It can affect their intelligence, their immunity. Oh, and she just joined. So, hi, Dr. Ari. I'll wait for her to request to join our live and then let her in. So, here's what I'll say while we're waiting for her. If you're thinking about getting pregnant at any point, in a year, 2 years, 3 years, now is the perfect time to start thinking about nourishing yourself so that your pregnancy goes as smoothly as possible and so that your baby's as healthy as possible when your baby's born. And preconception, it should be mentioned, is not just a topic for moms, right? We need moms and dads to think about preconception health because the health of dad matters too when it comes to conceiving a child. But there's a ton of things that both parents can do. So, Dr. Ari has some really amazing content on her Instagram, which you guys should go check out if you're hanging out here and you're waiting and you're going to do some research. And her site is also incredible. And she's got a really cool preconception guide, which we'll chat with her about. But it gives you kind of this step-by-step process of a way to think about preparing your body for pregnancy that is not common. Even if you go to the OBGYN, you let your doctor know that you're ready to get pregnant, you're not going to get a high quality guide like this anywhere else. So here's Dr. Ari. So join me. Hey, John. Hello!
Wonderful. Okay.
How you
Had a little
doing?
trouble for a second, but I'm glad I got it all figured out.
It's the first time is the hardest. Now you're a pro.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, this is great to be on here with you.
Thank you so
Um,
much for joining us.
yeah, no, I'm really excited about it. This is my first Instagram live. I was telling Dr. Kate when we hopped on, so it's exciting to be able to join, especially with you.
Yes, likewise. So I know, like, the number one question I feel like I just have to ask you, because when I ask you, your answer is going to kind of really reveal a lot about your practice and your mission, is what do you wish more women knew about preconception health?
Yeah, so, when we kind of talked about what this time would be like, really what got me interested in preconception health initially was that I struggled with my own infertility issues. And I strictly thought about preconception health and preconception preparation from a standpoint of fertility and trying to increase my ability to conceive. And then when I started to really specialize in pediatrics and a pediatric population that was quite ill. So individuals suffering with neurodevelopmental disorders like autism or ADHD, or with immune system disorders like autoimmunity or eczema. I realized that preconception care is so much more than just trying to increase your chance of conception. It really comes down to preparing mom as optimally as possible, both so that she can set up her child with a great foundation for health, but also for her own health. And so another area that I really enjoy in my practice is the postpartum period. I think that becoming a mother in this transitional period is a really crucial time period, and it's often one that we're not really well equipped for. And so I like to really prepare mom prior to pregnancy so that she can enter into her pregnancy and that postpartum period feeling well for herself, but also for really to set the child up for the most optimal start of life. And so I know we're going to get into this, but so much research is pointing to really the child's propensity for the development of one of these neurodevelopmental disorders or immune system disorders really comes down to what is mom's health during pregnancy. So what did she do to really clean up her environment, clean up her gut, solve her hormonal issues prior to pregnancy? That plays a big role. And this is very personal to me because I got pregnant and it was a surprise. And again, I was really working on my fertility, but really only working on that. I was trying to get pregnant. And when I became pregnant, it was a bit of a surprise. I didn't necessarily take those extra steps to optimize my health. So I didn't go into pregnancy at a super healthy state. I still had a lot of work to do. And I'm thankful that my daughter is as healthy as she is, but she has some things that were very clearly linked back to some of the imbalances that I was dealing with in pregnancy. So going for stage 2, I'm going to be that much more conscientious about how do I prepare myself, not only because I want my child to really succeed and just have the optimal foundation, but also so that I can feel really well. Because unfortunately, a lot of our therapeutics that are helpful in treating during pregnancy and postpartum are limited because, our focus really turns into baby and less on, mom. We are limited in what we can do to really support mom during those time periods.
Oh my gosh. Okay, guys, so much in this, for you that I am so excited for people to hear. But I love that you have this balanced approach, right? Yes, we want baby to be healthy and we're going to optimize baby's chances at having the highest IQ and the best functioning immune system and the best, just physical health possible. But not forgetting that, mom's pregnancy, it doesn't have to be hard. Postpartum doesn't have to be full of anxiety and depression and struggle. You can really be thriving throughout each of these stages, but it's very dependent on knowing about these really key interventions that we're going to chat about. Okay. I have so many questions I want to ask you, but you said something a little bit ago. And so I think for many women, they know, okay, I have to eat enough when I'm pregnant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I probably should take a prenatal. But is it more complicated than that?
Yeah. So I think where I like to start is really in preconception. And I'm a huge advocate, again, starting here because our options are limited in pregnancy. So again, if we're trying to, I first like to recognize what are the areas that we want to examine when we're thinking about conceiving. And if you are in the midst of this and you're pregnant, please don't feel an ounce of shame or guilt. There's still so much that you can do in the midst of pregnancy that can really modify those risk factors and set you, improve your health during this time period. But if possible, in an ideal situation, and 50% of pregnancies are unplanned. So I get that this is not everyone's reality, but when possible, if we're conscious about our conception, I like to think about what can we do prior to conception to improve our health for those various reasons. And so I break this up into 4 main areas, and we could go into much more, but I think that the most important areas here are nutritional quality. So what are we consuming? Are we deficient in anything? And I'm going to go into this more, but I know that, both Dr. Kate and I are huge advocates of food first. And so we want to use as, minimal supplements as possible, but we also recognize the importance of them, especially during the prenatal time period. And especially if there are some, various factors, which we'll get into, that could potentially lower your nutritional status. So nutrients, gut health, because really our microbiome, which is the bugs within our gut, within our vaginal canal, within our oral, our oral bacteria within our skin, is what transfers to baby. And there's so much research on the gut and how that influences baby's immune health and neurodevelopment. So I'm a huge advocate of getting our microbiome in a good state so that we transfer that to baby. Toxicity, because there are unfortunately, we just live in a world that's more toxic than it has ever been before. And this isn't about avoiding every single toxin out there because it's impossible, but taking considerable measures to identify potential toxins in your environment and really mitigate those where possible. And if you feel like there's been a significant toxic exposure, then potentially doing a little bit of detoxification ahead of time. And then hormonal imbalances. And really the hormonal imbalances are more for mom, because this can really change not only success of pregnancy, but how she's feeling in the midst of pregnancy and in the postpartum period.
Okay. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so and when you say particularly for mom, that means the other stuff applies to dads too, it sounds like then.
Well, I would say like a little bit of both. All of this is talking about mom, but I would say hormonally it's more of a, there's some implications for baby, but it's more for mom in this situation.
Okay.
Now, when I'm talking from a dad point of view, I like to paint this illustration because I have a lot of moms come to me and they're all on board and they're ready to make lifestyle changes. They're ready to make dietary changes, but it's harder to get the dad involved. And when we kind of frame it as a timeline, like what is the most crucial time period for dad? It's the 3 months leading up to conception, because dad's sperm regenerate every 3 months. So really what I want is dad to be really engaged those 3 months prior to conception. Mom's engagement is much longer timeline. So her egg kind of maturation time point is about 4 months. So the 4 months leading up to pregnancy, and then throughout pregnancy, and then throughout breastfeeding are really important. So for mom, this could be 2 years, 3 years, depending on how long she breastfeeds. And so what I like to do is kind of allow dad to see that picture. And so if we can get your engagement for 3 months, we can really change the genetics within baby. And then, you know, mom is dedicated to be committed for this period of time. So from dad's standpoint, really what we're trying to do is optimize sperm quality. And that comes down to the same things. Like, what are the inflammatory, toxic triggers that could damage the DNA within the sperm, and how do we mitigate those? And then how do we get his diet full of like plenty of rich antioxidants and other things to support his mitochondria? And if he does have issues, then we'll take a much closer look at the sperm, because this is a 50-50 ordeal, and male factor fertility is far underestimated. They always look into mom first, but dad is often a contributing factor here. And then we'll do some higher grade interventions. But if we're talking about healthy mom, healthy dad, for the most part, we still want to take that time leading up to pregnancy to cut back on alcohol or eliminate it if all possible. You know, make sure that dad or mom aren't around secondhand smoke, decrease our toxicity exposure, and really pay attention to our diet quality, organic as much as possible, just really nurturing yourself prior to that conception period.
Let me ask you this, because I think a lot of people have heard, okay, I should cut back on alcohol, whatever. Can we talk a little bit about biochemically why that is?
Yeah, and so the alcohol is a toxin, okay? And so that is just like the reality of it. Our liver has to transform it, and in its metabolism, one of the nutrients that it requires in quite considerably is an antioxidant called glutathione. Yeah. When glutathione becomes depleted because we're consuming alcohol, then we're not able to handle a number of other toxins that we're exposed to. And remember, we can't completely eliminate toxins in our environment. So now, you know, we leave ourselves more vulnerable to these other oxidative stressors. And oxidative stress is what damages the DNA within the sperm and the egg. And so really we don't want any damaged DNA in the sperm or egg, because that contributes to potentially some genetically based malformations or early miscarriage. And really that's the latter of which is the most common, because most of the time if there is a genetic damage or DNA damage, the baby is not viable. And so we will have these repeated miscarriages and early miscarriages, not ones that last for the first trimester, but really within those first 6 weeks.
Okay. So guys, I want you to hear this. You have this amazing chemical called glutathione that goes around and really helps to protect and heal your own tissues. Mm-hmm. And when we drink, we deplete that. So, and then that can be a problem when you're trying to conceive the healthiest baby possible. So I love your explanation of that. That's amazing. Hopefully it makes a little more sense for the people at home. We're not just being like your average doctor telling you to give up alcohol. It's for a very targeted reason, for a very targeted period of time to optimize the health of your future little one. So I love that. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. And then you talked about, so decreasing toxic exposure. So some of the things that, I talk to my clients about are like, switch out some of the cleaners in your home,
Mhm.
maybe take off your shoes when you walk in the door. But what do you feel like are kind of the heavy hitters when it comes to decreasing toxic exposure? When
Yeah, so this is such a like broad topic, and
it is,
um
yeah,
toxins are it's extremely complex. There are
yeah,
various types of toxins. I kind of categorize them in very broadly three flavors. So we have our mold toxins, which we'll get in, like touch on
yes,
briefly, but mold is very prevalent. Even here in California, where it's a desert climate, mold exists quite at high rates. And the mold can cause issues on its own, but it also secretes these toxins. And there are certain toxins that can affect your hormones and your ability to reproduce and the immune system. Heavy metals, so heavy metals are like mercury and lead and
right,
arsenic and aluminum, and you may have heard of those. And then chemical toxins. And the chemical toxins is one that I think when we think about toxins, this is typically what we consider or we first think about. So these are things, what's in your products and what's within your cleaning products, what's in your, how much plastic are you using?
right,
All of these, like, do you have a dog with a flea collar on it?
right,
Are you using pesticides in your backyard or
right,
herbicides to like, have
right,
you recently fumigated your house? So
right.
from a chemical standpoint, I think that's where we can first take action and be very proactive about looking at our products and looking at the ingredients. And I could go into every single ingredient and tell you how to read the labels. Or what's easier is if you don't already use it or if you've not heard about it, the Environmental Working Group is a nonprofit organization, and they have a site of their website called Skin Deep. So it's ewg.org/skin deep. And they have vetted millions, I don't know millions, but tons of products,
Mhm.
and they give them a rating. And really what you're looking for is a rating between 1 and 3. And if it's between 1 and 3, then generally I feel safe about that product and I'm happy for mom to use it. And so as women, we put so many personal care products on our skin, and we know that those are absorbed. So, we, as naturopathic doctors, often prescribe hormonal hormone replacement, and a lot of times we'll use it as a skin application, so we know that we absorb that. So we really want to be mindful of what other things are we putting on our skin that we're absorbing, and just make sure our products are clean. And the same goes for like Dr. Kate said, our household products, like our laundry detergent, our cleaning products, those sorts of things.
Yep,
And then
beautiful.
beyond that, there are plenty of additional things that we can take action towards. And so the next thing, which I think is something that we all need to be looking out for, is reducing plastics. So there are plastics in our environment that are less harmful than others. So generally, if you look at the recycle number, if it's a 5, 4, or 2, then it's okay. So I like the little rhyme, 5, 4, or 2, all the rest are bad for you. So if it's not a 5, 4, or 2, you want to eliminate it. You don't want it in there. And that can be really helpful to just like take a look at your bottles, as much as possible, switch it over to glass, stainless steel, ceramic, and especially make sure you're not heating things in plastic, but really try to eliminate them when you can, because plastics tend to contain 3 ingredients that I really don't like. So phthalates, which we can get into if you feel like it, why we don't like those for reproduction and for
Right.
children, BPA, and then vinyl chloride. And so those are the 3 things that I really like to get out, and that's plastics and then canned foods. So minimizing canned foods as much as possible, minimizing drinking out of cans because they have the lining that's often containing BPA, and just moving as much as possible to eating fresh foods from the ground, eliminating packaging.
Love it. Oh my gosh, guys, this is why you have to head over to Dr. Aries' Instagram and like find the link to her preconception guide, because there's a lot, right? And the point when you work with a doctor like Dr. Ari is that it feels less overwhelming because you have somebody who's walking through it with you step by step and who's really helping you determine your exposure so that you're not tackling this on your own. You have a guide and a partner who's walking with you every step of the way.
Yeah.
I would love you to talk a little bit because I think there's knowledge out there. Okay, I should avoid plastics. Okay, whatever, that, but you know exactly why. So can you give
Yeah.
people even just a 2-sentence overview into the biochemistry of why plastics can be harmful?
Yeah, so they're a little bit different depending on which component in plastics we're
Right.
talking about. But there are what we would say are plasticizers. So the biggest two that I usually focus on are the phthalates and the BPA. So, and of those two, the phthalates are the biggest concern. So phthalates tend to make plastics a little bit softer, where BPA tends to make plastics a little bit more rigid. And so they're added to whatever plastic to kind of change the malleability of those. But there's a lot of research showing that phthalates in particularly can be quite damaging to the offspring when mom is exposed. So some of the things that it's been associated with are higher risk of atopic diseases, so things like allergies, eczema, and that is something that's definitely on the rise in our population. But beyond that, one of the most concerning things is the way that it affects male children. So male children, when exposed to phthalates, have a disruption in their reproductive tracts. So this could lead to infertility in the baby. And so I have a strong suspicion that the big one of the main reasons behind male infertility these days is phthalate exposure in utero with mom. So infertility, it can lead to various defects on the penis and kind of almost feminization of the male. So they can have undescended testes, they can have various like a shortened anogenital space, which is more a female characteristic. They can have smaller penises overall. They can have different defects where the urethra is coming out of different areas of the penis called hypospadias. So there's various things that can happen when exposed to phthalates, especially for the male child. And so this is why, again, it's so crucial that you're avoiding phthalates. Now, phthalates are oftentimes really likely to be disguised in products. We don't necessarily put the word phthalate on there. So this is where EWG is helpful because they've done the investigations. But generally speaking, if anything says fragrance, fragrance is a trademark term. So we can put anything in fragrance. It could be two types of different products, or it could be disguising like 17 different compounds, or not 17, 117 different compounds. It could be super wide because the company, that's their trademark. They don't have to disclose what makes their fragrance. And oftentimes the phthalates are within that fragrance. So I avoid fragrance. That includes perfume. Now, there are more natural perfumes out there that are essential oil based that are fine. But this is another big one. We like smelling good. But if you're noticing those smells within like your laundry detergent, within your whatever candles are giving you a headache, that's a big sign that there are likely some toxins in those that fragrance.
Oh, beautiful. And guys, what I want you to hear from this, so maybe you already have kids, and maybe you're watching this because you're thinking of getting pregnant again, or you have a friend who's thinking of getting pregnant. And so what I want you to hear with this as well is that reducing these exposures in any time of your life, any time of your baby's life, is going to be helpful for them. It's not just in utero that these phthalates and other toxins are harmful. It's throughout the lifespan. So please feel empowered by this new education and information, and it's going to change your and your family's habits going forward for the rest of your life. But I appreciate you going into that, Dr. Ari, because I really feel that that's an area where once people truly understand why they need to avoid it, it just becomes a bit easier. It makes more sense. So
yeah, absolutely. I think it is difficult. And I think my husband, family doesn't always listen to family. And so he wasn't super motivated until there's a documentary out there called The Disappearing Male. I think it's on YouTube for sure, but it's not on Netflix. But it talks a lot about the impact of plastics and how the plastics in our environment are demasculinizing our society in a lot of ways, because a lot of these are estrogenic. So they act on the estrogen receptor. So BPA is one of those that acts on the estrogen receptor. And we see a lot of estrogen related conditions and obesity because of the BPA.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Guys, got homework. Go check it out. Yeah, and I want to be clear, when we're talking about masculine and feminine and male and female, we are talking about this through a clinical lens of how many hormones you have and the characteristics and phenotypes that shows up with. So I just want to be very clear that this is coming from a very medical perspective, and definitely everybody go do your research. But that it makes a lot of sense. And so this is why, to protect your own health, your family's health, your baby's health, avoiding plastics, and then going more into the toxins in your preconception guide that you need to avoid is going to be a great idea. Okay.
No, thank
Thank
you for
you
that
so much. I
clarification.
know. I feel like we could have talked for like an hour on that,
Yeah.
but I know we have more to talk
Yeah.
about. Do you mind if we switch? Because one of
Yeah.
the expertises that you have that I feel like is really rare is that you have done a whole series on Instagram that people can go check out, but also you talk about this a lot in your clinic and you do research outside of the clinic on what really needs to be in a prenatal vitamin in order to adequately nourish mom and baby. So
Yeah.
in your opinion, what do you wish more people knew about prenatals?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And so, Dr. Kate is right. One of my other jobs is consulting for a supplement company, and we've been working on our prenatal for the past 3 years. So I felt like going into this, I knew a considerable amount of preconception and what's needed, but like I found out so much more over the past 3 years, and now it's a topic I love to educate women on because it is a big deal choosing a prenatal. It isn't like your OBGYN says just pick one. They aren't all created equal. And so I'm actually going to be, if you're looking for an in-depth, because we can't cover every nutrient, but if you want an in-depth kind of overview of how to pick a prenatal, we're going to be doing a webinar next Tuesday, and maybe I can link it somewhere on my page, but it's through the company Nourishment is Needed, and we'll be going over that next Tuesday. But for right now, there are some, there's various nutrients, but I'll pick a couple of my favorite ones to look out for that are key differentiators when we are looking for a good versus a bad prenatal. Okay. And this is not only about the amounts, but it's about the forms. So the one that I would love to kind of start with, because it's the one that gets the most press, is folic acid or folate. And so with a lot of OBGYNs, if they say that you don't need a prenatal, they'll say you at least have to take folic acid. And folic acid is a synthetic form of folate that we have made the reason why we take this nutrient is to prevent neural tube defects. So the neural tube is one of the first things that's formed in baby, and it really sets up the whole nervous system. So we need it for brain, nerve development, and oftentimes if there's not enough folic acid, the baby is just either not viable or there's some extreme, neural tube defects when baby comes out. And so the implementation of folic acid, the synthetic derivative of folate, was extremely helpful in lowering folate or neural tube defects. So we know that it's really effective for that instance. However, we also in the late 1990s decided that this nutrient is super important. We want to make sure that moms have it, whether they're not on a prenatal or not. So we started fortifying our foods in the United States. And now our food contains folic acid, and we're supplementing with it. Now, the thing about folic acid is that it's not readily used by the body. So our body needs to transfer it into a nutrient called 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate in order to use it. And some people aren't able to do that. So we can't use folic acid, or we can use it, but not efficiently. So what happens is now there's a bunch of this folic acid that is essentially just running around in the bloodstream and not being utilized. So it's unmetabolized. And there's a lot of research that has come out over the last 10 years pointing that unmetabolized folic acid to increased risk of autism and partially attributing to the rise of autism rates. So what I prefer to use are nutrients in that are already bioavailable for the body. So the body doesn't need to convert them, they can just use them. So this either is in the form of folinic acid or methyl tetrahydrofolate. Most prenatals in the functional medicine world will use the 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate, which is abbreviated as MTHF. So you can find that. You want to make sure that it's a folate, not a folic acid.
Perfect. So guys, pick up a prenatal if it says folic acid and not folinic acid or 5-MTHF. You might want to keep looking on the shelf. Really go look at Dr. Ari's guide because she'll tell you a good one to buy and you'll save yourself a lot of time. But okay, so that is the first thing that you kind of educate people about looking for.
Yeah, and I'll say you and I both know that there are some exceptions to that rule. So there are some people that do better on folic acid, but very few. So we don't want to for the most part, most people are not going to use that nutrient very well.
Okay, and guys, and this is a plug really, if you're struggling with fertility, or you just have the time, right? You're not going to get pregnant for another couple months. Go see a doctor to actually, because there are tests that you can run to determine if you have the genes to use folic acid or not. And so you don't have to wonder, you can find
Yeah,
out. Yeah, perfect.
absolutely. Yeah, so that's one big nutrient. Now, I'm in the brain sphere, so I like brain nutrients. That's really important for me. So the next nutrient that is really not commonly in prenatals, but very, very important for brain development and eye development in the young ones, as well as the neural tube, preventing neural tube defects, is choline. So our needs for moms in pregnancy is 550 milligrams. And choline, you can find it in eggs. So if you're eating frequent eggs, you may get an ounce in animal protein. But if you're vegetarian or vegan, the likelihood is you are not getting enough choline, and you need it. Your baby needs it. And so any amount of choline in a prenatal is a plus on my end, but really, like, the higher the better. So you want as close to 500 as you can, but as long as you're getting 150, some supplemental, and you're eating some animal protein, I feel good about that. If you're not eating animal protein, then it makes it that much more essential that you're supplementing with it.
Amazing. Okay, good. Yeah, thank you for noting that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so choline, and then DHA. So DHA is an omega-3 fatty acid. There's no requirement for this because we can synthesize DHA from another omega acid called ALA, which we can get from animal products, but we can't synthesize it very efficiently. So only about 9% of that ALA is actually converting to DHA. And DHA is another thing that's really, really crucially important for baby's brain development. And so I like mothers to get at least 250 milligrams of DHA in pregnancy and in the postpartum period. And this can be found through fish. However, as you know, or you might not know if you haven't experienced pregnancy, but if you are pregnant or if you have been pregnant, your OBGYN has probably cautioned you about not consuming too much fish. And that's because fish can be contaminated with mercury. And we know that baby's brain is very sensitive to mercury, so we try to limit our fish consumption in pregnancy. So we are not able to get it through diet oftentimes because we're not able to eat enough fish. So you can also do it through algae or seaweed. So if you're eating a lot of seaweed, you might get it. But DHA supplementation is something I strongly advocate for, and that might not be within the prenatal, but can be bought as a separate fish oil supplement or algae oil supplement.
Perfect. Okay.
Great.
Those are awesome.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then a couple other things. B12. So B12 is really important for DNA and making sure that DNA is forming optimally. And it's also really important for energy. So there are multiple forms of B12. The one that I try to avoid is cyanocobalamin. Now, this is often used because it's a really cheap form of the nutrient, but it's not necessarily well used by the body. And there are similar studies to the folic acid scenario, although they're not as just kind of starting, so we don't have a strong conclusion. But there's some studies showing that this high B12 is also associated with increased risk for autism. But I have an assumption because, similarly, it's due to the unmetabolization of it. So it's because this B12 is just floating around the bloodstream rather than actually being used. So the form that I like to use, or two forms that I'm good with using, are either methylcobalamin or adenosylcobalamin. And
I think we may have lost her, guys. This was so exciting. Oh, we did. She left. Maybe she'll be back. I think so. You probably all needed, maybe like me, a little bit of a breather because this is so much information, and it can feel a little bit overwhelming. But what I want you guys to take away from this is that working with a doctor who specializes in the preconception period, you get to really know the specific nutrients that are going to be best for you. And so you're not going to be at the grocery store looking at all the prenatals trying to figure this out on your own. You're going to leave the appointment with a recommendation for a form that contains everything that you and your baby need. And this is not just about prenatals, right? Like Dr. Ari was talking about the different types of food that you can eat. And so there's a huge nutritional component to this that requires attention too. And it doesn't, I think a lot of times when people think about food as medicine, it doesn't feel fun. It doesn't feel easy. It doesn't feel light. It feels heavy and annoying. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, am I going to have to eat fish 4 times a week, and how am I going to cook that? This is where doctors who are trained in nutrition excel. It's our job to make it easy and fun. Oh, and she's back. I'm going to let her back in so that you can hear her keep talking about the science behind why all these different forms of nutrients are so important. Hi!
Hi, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened.
Me neither. It happens. It's
Okay.
live.
I know, technology.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah. I was catching everybody up and kind of just like recapping what you said, and also saying like this is why seeing a doctor who's really educated about this and can help people understand their own unique metabolic needs is really important and can make this a lot easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you and I both know, like, especially from a mood perspective, there might be variations in which prenatal I choose, or if I look at their blood work and, their B12 levels are great, maybe they need a lower amount, or vitamin D is another thing. But generally speaking, there are some principles that carry over and are believed to be true. And, so that's what we'll talk about. And I think the other thing we both talked about on our initial call was just the importance for a prenatal. So why do we have to take a prenatal when we didn't take a prenatal in the past? Right. And this really, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm so glad you said that, because I think a lot of people are like, I eat healthy. Why do I need to take a vitamin?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so one of the big things, it's not your fault, but our diets are extremely deficient because of the way that we have with the introduction of GMO crops, which are selectively depleted of certain nutrients in order to prevent, infestation of certain types of bugs. And they are, we have also just developed more restrictive diets. So this is something where I have a lot of women who come to me and they're eating a paleo diet or a Whole30 diet, and they don't realize that their restrictions are actually putting them in a state of deficiency for some key nutrients, or even vegan and vegetarian. And so one of the things that I make note of is you're eating this really healthy diet, like you're eating whole foods, you're not doing any processed foods, and likely you're deficient in iodine. Iodine is also one of those nutrients that's really important for brain development. And our kind of sources of iodine in our diet are either iodized salts, which if we're eating sea salt, we're not getting that. And if we're not eating processed foods, we're not getting that. Or seaweed. And we usually aren't eating enough seaweed to make up that difference. So iodine is really important. Same with calcium. For a mom, if you're not eating dairy, you definitely need to be paying closer attention to where you're getting your calcium. Now, if you're eating non-dairy milks, those are fortified with calcium, so you're likely getting it. But if you're not drinking non-dairy milks and you're not drinking dairy and you're not eating dairy, then that's another nutrient that becomes really, really important to pay attention to.
Beautiful. And guys, this is another reason, like when you go into a doctor, you don't just want a pat on the back for like, great, you're eating vegan, you're good to go, like great job. You want the doctor to sit down and ask exactly what you're eating, put this into a software that analyzes the different amounts of nutrients that you get in a day so that they can assure you whether or not you're getting enough of each nutrient or not. And so I love that you do that. And that's what a responsible doctor will do if they're working with you to optimize the nutrients that you're getting through food. But a lot of people don't. They choose the sea salt because it's healthier.
Yeah.
Which, great. It has a ton of minerals in it. That's awesome.
I love sea salt.
It's great. And it tastes wonderful. But it doesn't have iodine. And so let's chat about that just for a second. So guys, you need iodine for your thyroid to work properly. And having your thyroid work properly, especially in pregnancy, is so incredibly important. Because your thyroid regulates the metabolism of every single cell in your body. So it's not just about your energy, it's about literally how fast your cells do every single job they need to do in a day to keep you and baby healthy. And if it could just be as simple as you've been eating sea salt for 5 years and instead of regular table salt, and you're not eating a ton of seaweed and now all of a sudden you're deficient, it can happen that easily, even on a really healthy diet. So that's why you need someone who's going to look into this stuff for you. So I love that. You really have your patients back, so that's great.
Yeah, no, wonderful. I love that you look into that. And actually, I mean, you probably do even more of an in-depth kind of intake with food, which is great, because that takes a lot of work. So I love that you actually go through each of their dietary needs. And But yeah, we have, and I'm included in this realm. Like, part of my issue was that I didn't emphasize the extra need for calcium, and I had been dairy free for way too long. And that played out in roles with my child's teeth. And there are some minerals as well, even with the iodine. Iodine plays a role in teeth mineralization as well. And so if I, like, knowing that now, I'm much more conscientious of where I'm either getting this in my diet or how I'm choosing a prenatal or other supplements to complement my diet so that I'm fully repleted. And you can go through your diet and do a detailed dietary history. You can do certain labs to assess your nutrient status, but at least just taking a look at your diet as a whole and recognizing where might I be deficient and where should I place a little bit extra emphasis. So especially if you're on a restricted diet, or you're just like, maybe you're not intentionally restricting your diet, but you're eating the same foods. There's not much diversity in your diet. That can also lead to some deficiencies.
Yeah, it's so easy, guys. Like, I think in the West in particular, and as Americans, because we have a population that tends more towards overweight, we just assume that it'd be impossible for somebody who's a normal weight to be nutrient deficient. But I hope you're hearing from this conversation that it's quite possible. And that's why you really need somebody who's got your back. So we have your back.
Yeah.
It's great.
Wonderful.
So yeah, guys, we've kept you, Dr. Ari, for 45 minutes. And I know, thank you so much for all of your time.
That went so fast.
I know. Well, and I want people to know where they can find more of your information, because you give so much free, amazing content away online, so that I feel like anybody who follows you is going to be more educated in the next 30 minutes if they just start scrolling. But you also have some pretty cool stuff coming up that I would love people to know how to stay posted with you and keep pace with you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Katie.
Yeah.
So yeah, the best place to follow me is my Instagram. That's where I do the majority of my content creation. And so you can find me at dr.ari Calhoun, Calhoun. So that's my Instagram handle, Dr. Ari Calhoun. And that's where, I post the majority of my information there. I do have a preconception checklist that you can go and check out if you're thinking about conceiving here in the near future and just want to know, like, how do I best prepare? What are the areas that I need to assess prior to pregnancy? And I am going to be, I'm working on my preconception course. I'm hoping we'll launch so that, everyone can follow along at their own pace and really do it at a time that is best for them. And if you have any questions about working with me, please reach out. You can do that via my Instagram. I have a 20-minute consultation there. But and if you're in Dr. Kate's area, she's also a wonderful resource. And I would strongly recommend you working with her prior to pregnancy, or even in the midst of pregnancy, because she does so much wonderful work with diet that we don't need crazy supplemental interventions. Just make sure you're supported during this time period. And we're doing everything that we can to support not only baby, but you as well. So we're both a huge advocate of, like, mom's health is equally as important, and we need to place just as much emphasis on that during the preconception, pregnancy, and postpartum period.
I love that. Yes. So guys, please, like, join the tribe. That's part of what I love about your community, Dr. Ari, is it's not just a clinic, it's a community, right? Of people who have these same values, who want the best for their families. And so when you follow Dr. Ari, you're going to get notifications about all the amazing free stuff that she does. The webinar next week is a great example. You're going to go so in depth into the science of prenatals.
Right.
Yeah. And thank you so much. I feel like that's a really big service to the world, right? Because you create a product that's a prenatal. You had such a hand in the science that went behind creating this never before created prenatal. It's a package deal. I'm so excited for this. And I truly believe this will change the world. It's not only going to change mama's life, but when you make babies healthier, those babies go on, it's going to cost less because they'll have less health problems. They're going to be the happiest, smartest versions of themselves, the healthiest versions of themselves. And that is such a gift to the world. So please, like, keep shining your light. We are so happy to have had you on here today.
It is huge. And I love that you say all of that, because it's really that it takes a paradigm shift. So the more intentional we are, really, like, I heard one thing, like when mamas join together and mamas to be join together, we can accomplish great things because we are dedicated to really look out for the health of our, you know, our children. And so, don't start when you're just like when the baby comes out, like start now. It's so important, and you will be forever thankful, not only for the health of your child, but that you're going into motherhood feeling vibrant, feeling well, feeling like yourself, because pregnancy can deplete us. That is what it does. Like the body prioritizes baby, and so you want to make sure that you're sufficiently nourished going into pregnancy.
I love that. And I will say, guys, if you're listening to this and you have little ones at home or you're in the postpartum period, it might seem like Dr. Aries like really does mostly preconception. That is so far from the truth, right? Like if your little one is struggling, Dr. Aries started doing pediatrics, right? Like that's what you focused on kids who need help, who are struggling with their health or their development. And so please reach out to her. If you leave this webinar thinking, oh my gosh, first of all, I wish I would have known this, you know, a year ago, or I had my pregnancy and maybe I was nutrient deficient and I just never corrected it. And now ever since I gave birth, I don't feel well, or my child is struggling with a ton of allergies. Dr. Ari has so much to give in this area too. So yeah, it comes full circle. So I'm thrilled to have introduced you to everybody today and started this journey. Yeah, and we will do this again.
Yeah, it's been so much fun. Thank you so much, Dr. Kate.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Goodbye.
Okay, bye-bye.